In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. From this we understand that the world did not come into being by chance, but began through God's plan and word. On the first day God said, "Let there be light," and created light. Light and darkness were separated, and day and night came into being. On the second day he made the sky, and on the third day he separated the seas and the land and caused vegetation and trees to grow upon it. On the fourth day he made the sun, the moon, and the stars, the lights of the heavens, to govern day and night. On the fifth day he created the fish of the sea and the birds of the air. And on the sixth day he made the beasts and the livestock, and finally mankind. What is important is that when God made people, he made them in our image, after our likeness. In other words, human beings are not merely created creatures, but bearers of God's image, called to act as God's representatives, to rule over and tend the earth. When God looked over all he had made, he said it was very good. This means the world was harmonious and beautiful in God's sight. The world's work of creation was completed in 6 days, and on the seventh day, God ceased from creating and rested. He blessed that day and made it holy. This is the origin of the Sabbath we observe today. Now the focus turns to humanity. At that time, no rain had yet fallen upon the earth, and vegetation had not yet grown. A mist rose from the ground and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the dust became a living being. The first man, Adam, who moved, thought, and felt. God planted a beautiful garden for Adam called Eden. The garden was full of trees, pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the very middle of the garden were 2 special trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river flowed out of Eden and divided into 4 headwaters. The Bible even records the names of those rivers, which include the rivers we know as the Euphrates and the Tigris. Adam's role in Eden was not merely to play and rest. God gave him the task of tending and keeping the garden. He also gave him freedom. You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. This was the first command God gave to Adam. Seeing that Adam was alone, God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." God brought every animal before Adam, and Adam named them one by one: lion, eagle, sheep, and so on. But none proved to be a true companion. So God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep, took one of his ribs, and made a woman from it. God brought the woman to Adam, and Adam joyfully said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Thus, the order of marriage began. A man shall leave his parents and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Adam and his wife were naked and were not ashamed, because there was no sin, and their relationship was pure. But the crafty serpent came to Eve in the garden and whispered, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any of the trees'?" Eve replied that they could eat from the trees in the garden, except for the tree in the middle. God had commanded that they must not eat or touch it, for if they did, they would die. The serpent craftily said, "You will not surely die. On the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom. She took and ate it and gave some to her husband, who also ate. Immediately their eyes were opened, and they realized they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. In the evening they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden and hid among the trees in fear. God called to Adam, "Where are you?" Adam answered, trembling, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" Adam shifted blame, saying, "The woman you gave me the fruit, and I ate it." The woman also blamed the serpent, saying, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Then God pronounced judgment. To the serpent he said, "It would be more cursed than other animals, crawl on its belly, eat dust all its life, and there would be enmity between the serpent and the woman, and between their offspring. The woman's offspring would bruise the serpent's head, and the serpent would bruise his heel." To the woman, he assigned increased pain in childbearing and relational struggle with her husband. To Adam, he declared that the ground would be cursed because of him. He would eat from it through painful toil all the days of his life, and ultimately return to the dust. Adam named his wife Eve, meaning the mother of all living. God showed compassion and made garments of skin for them, but he would not allow them to remain in Eden. He expelled them from the garden and placed cherubim and a flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life. The perfect peace and innocence were broken, yet God also provided a promise of hope. The offspring of the woman would ultimately overcome the serpent. This promise is the first hint of the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ. Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain became a farmer, and Abel became a shepherd. One day, they both brought offerings to the Lord. Cain brought some of the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. God accepted Abel and his offering, but did not accept Cain and his offering, because Abel offered in faith and with a sincere heart. Cain was angry, and his face fell. God asked him, "Why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do well, sin lies at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." Yet Cain yielded to sin's temptation. He lured his brother into the field and killed him, the first murder in human history. God asked Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain replied, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" God said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out from the ground." He judged Cain that the ground would no longer give its strength to him, and that Cain would be a fugitive and wanderer on the earth. Terrified, Cain protested that the punishment was too great and that everyone who found him would kill him. But God did not abandon Cain completely. He put a mark on him so that no one who found him would kill him. Cain then left the Lord's presence and settled east of Eden, where he fathered descendants, built a city, and where various crafts and technologies began to develop, signs of early human civilization. Adam and Eve had another son, Seth, whom Eve said was given in place of Abel. Seth's descendants began to call on the name of the Lord. Thus the line of faith began to continue. Adam, created in God's image, fathered many children. He was 130 years old when Seth was born, and lived a total of 930 years. Seth fathered Enosh at 105 and lived 912 years. The genealogies continue in sequence, and one notable figure is Enoch. Enoch walked with God, and the Bible says, God took him away, meaning Enoch did not experience death in the usual way, but was translated by God, an extraordinary sign that walking with God can transcend death. This story strongly suggests that a life lived with God points beyond death. Enoch's son, Methuselah, is known as the longest-lived person in Scripture, living 969 years. Methuselah's descendant Lamech fathered Noah, and upon Noah's birth, Lamech said that the child would bring relief from their toil under the cursed ground. Noah would indeed become the pivotal figure through whom God would open a new chapter in history. As humanity multiplied on the earth, wickedness also increased. God observed that the thoughts and intentions of people's hearts were only evil continually, and he was grieved. He decided to judge the world. Yet in that dark generation, God had found a man who had found favor: Noah. Noah was righteous, blameless among his contemporaries, and he walked with God. He fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. God told Noah that he would wipe out the earth by a flood because of the violence filling it, and commanded Noah to build an ark so that he and his household might be preserved. God gave detailed instructions concerning the ark's size and construction, its length, breadth, and height: 3 decks with a window and a door, and it was to be sealed inside and out with pitch so it would not leak. He commanded Noah to bring into the ark pairs of every living creature, male and female, and to store food for them and for his household. Noah obeyed God's command. He brought into the ark 7 pairs of clean animals, a pair of unclean animals, and various birds. Noah and his family, 8 persons in all, entered the ark. Then the Lord shut them in. At the appointed time, the floodgates of the heavens opened, and rain fell for 40 days and nights. The waters rose and covered the earth. The ark floated on the waters, and all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. Every living thing on the face of the earth perished, except Noah and those with him in the ark. The flood waters prevailed on the earth for 150 days. God remembered Noah and caused a wind to pass over the earth, so the waters began to subside. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah sent out a raven, and later a dove, to test the state of the ground. The dove returned with an olive leaf in its mouth, signaling that the waters were abating. After waiting longer and sending the dove again, it did not return, confirming that the earth had dried. A new beginning was at hand. At last, God commanded Noah to come out of the ark with his family and the animals. Noah built an altar and offered burnt offerings to the Lord, a gesture of thanksgiving and covenantal devotion. God smelled the pleasing aroma and promised never again to curse the ground because of man or to destroy every living thing by a flood. God declared that while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease, meaning the world's seasons and cycles would continue. After the flood, God blessed Noah and his sons, renewed the command to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and reiterated humanity's stewardship and continuation. He also established a key regulation. While animals were given as food, the life, its blood, must not be consumed. This emphasized that life belongs to God, and human life must not be treated lightly. God then made an extraordinary covenant with Noah, his descendants, and every living creature, promising never again to destroy the earth by flood. The sign of that covenant was the rainbow set in the clouds. The rainbow would remind God of his covenant between himself and every living creature of all flesh, that the waters would never again become a flood to destroy all life. This promise is a message of hope to all humanity. Judgment may come, but grace continues. Genesis 9, also contains another narrative. Noah planted a vineyard, drank wine, and became drunk, which led to a family incident. Ham saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers. Shem and Japheth respectfully covered their father without looking. As a result, Canaan was pronounced cursed, while Shem and Japheth received blessing. Thus, after the flood, the world was repopulated through Noah's 3 sons. Their descendants spread across the earth and formed nations, each with distinct languages and territories. Japheth's descendants tended to settle north and in Europe. Ham's descendants settled mainly in Africa and the regions around Canaan. Shem's descendants settled in the Middle East and became the ancestors of peoples closely connected with Israel. Genesis 10 is not merely a list of names, but shows how God dispersed humanity across the earth in his providential plan. Among Ham's descendants were mighty and enterprising people who founded cities like Babel and Nineveh, figures symbolizing human power and the rise of civilization apart from God. Among Shem's line are those connected to Israel, and names like Peleg, meaning division, may hint at events such as the later Tower of Babel. From Genesis chapters 1 through 10, we see God creating the world by his word, human disobedience, introducing sin and its consequences of pain and sorrow, and yet God not abandoning humanity. Through Noah, God provided a way of salvation, and by the Rainbow Covenant, promised never again to destroy the earth by flood. That promise is not merely an ancient story, it remains a living promise for us today. Beloved, God has not forgotten us. Even when sin separates us from him, God continually prepares a way of salvation and calls us. Our beginning and end belong to God, and only in him can we find true life and hope. May today's message lead you to experience anew the depth of God's love. May our lives be built, not on our own will, but on God's purposes. Thank you for joining, and may God's grace and peace be with your families and your lives.